Hey watch friends, I've been teasing them on the channel, but today's the day. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple Signum Cudas. In case you're not yet familiar with the brand Signum, this is a new microbrand, but it's created by the founder of a popular microbrand, Straton. So this is a spin-off sister company that's going in a different direction, primarily focusing on dive watches, and additionally you'll see that there's a lot of dial varieties that are going to be coming out from them as well. That's really their main focus. So one of the big things that I'm going to spend a little more time in this review than I typically do is going through the specs. The reason for that being, as you can see here, they're available in a larger and a smaller version, but the specs on the website go a little bit differently than some other companies do. Primarily, they focus on including specs with the crown guards. So that can be a little bit misleading if you're comparing these against some other models that are out there. So I want to take some time and go through detailed specs based on my caliper readings, but additionally I want to show some comparison to help give you a perspective, because a lot of times it's hard to pick up on camera what these exactly will look like on your wrist. So I'm going to have some reference points for you that should hopefully help with your decision. So first, looking at the large one here, I'm measuring in at 44.5 millimeters, but that's including the crown guards. So just looking at the case itself, comparing right here point to point, you're looking at about 41.5 on calipers, and then the bezel does slightly overhang, and that's coming in at 42.5. On the smaller one here, this is, I think, the real surprise. A lot of people look at this from the specs and expect this to be a 40 millimeter dive watch. However, this is 40.5 millimeters at the crown guards. So the actual case measurement is coming in at around 37.8 millimeters, and then the bezel is 38.5. So a lot of people, this is going to be a little on the small side by modern standards, but we'll talk about that more as we go throughout the video. In terms of lug sizes, both of these do use common strap-friendly sizes. This is 22 millimeters on the large and 20 millimeters on the small. Both of these do taper down on these bracelets, and we'll check that out in more detail as well. Lug to lug is very small wrist friendly, but it will work for a variety of wrist sizes. This one is coming in at 48 millimeters, and the smaller one is coming in at 44 millimeters. For overall thickness, they're coming in more similarly than I would have otherwise expected based on the size difference. This one's coming in at 14 millimeters, and this one's coming in at 13.6. Both of these, as you can see from this side angle here, do have a flat sapphire crystal, and this does have inner AR coating, and that's going to be the same across both of these models. One of the things that's really cool with their offerings is they do give you a variety of choices, and we'll talk about some of those details more. But one of the things that you'll notice right off the bat is this one has a date, this one does not. So I'm happy to have one of each of these options in hand. And I do want to thank, I was remiss in not mentioning, these were sent in to me by Signum. These are prototype models, so please keep that in mind. However, these are currently in production and are available for shipping. I did not receive any compensation for filming this review, and I will be returning these after the review. Alright, sorry about that. Back to the specs. So with this one on the left here with the date does come with an NH35 for the movement, and one of the things I think was really nice, not only do they give you the date option, but they don't just stick with the NH35. This one actually has the NH38 in it, so you won't have the phantom date position, so it just goes straight from the crown being unscrewed to popping it out, and you do have the hacking with both of those, but that will be a stop here, whereas this will put you in first position, will be to adjust your date, as is typical for the NH35. Both of these are going to come with 200 meters of water resistance, or 20 atmospheres, so they're plenty sufficient for most dive enthusiasts out there, though I suspect that, like most dive watches, the majority of you are probably going to be primarily desk diving with these. As far as the weight, size to my 6.5 inch wrist, these on the bracelets are coming in at 180.6 grams for the larger and 150 grams for the smaller. So there is definitely a very noticeable difference in weight as well as the size between these two models. In terms of accessories, these come pretty basic. So you get, of course, the watch themselves. They come on these stainless steel bracelets, and then you'll have a nice branded box that this comes with. It's just a pretty basic setup, so I don't want to spend too much time focusing on that one. With respect to the warranty, both of these are going to come with a 2-year or 24-month warranty, so you are pretty well covered, and it is nice compared to a lot of other micro brands that are only offering 1 year as their base. In terms of dial, let's go ahead and look at some of the overall features and characteristics of these watches. One of the biggest things that you'll be struck with is, of course, the dial options here, and you can see that we have two different dials that are on camera right now. So we have an Abalone version, but then additionally we have, this is a Heated Meteorite version. One of the big things throughout the entire Signum lineup, and it's really showing with the current offerings as well as upcoming offerings, are the variety of dial choices you'll have. A lot of exotic materials, a lot of options. You have everything from here is the Abalone, here is a Heated Meteorite. You have two mother of pearl options. There is also a plain meteorite, and there is additionally a full Lume version, and that goes in the opposite of most full Lumes, where the dial itself is C3 and then the markers are BGW9. Usually it's the reverse. While we're talking about those options, let's go ahead and briefly touch on the prices. The price for these starts at an insane $249 for the Pearl versions. It bumps up to $299 for the Abalone or for the full Lume version, and it's only $349 for either of the Meteorite versions. To me, for those offerings, just crazy for that. I will say those prices will be going up here after December 31st of 2020, but it's only going to be $50. So even at the retail price, I still think these are a steal for what you're getting, and we'll look more at the overall feature set. In terms of the overall options, as we already talked about here, there is a date window at the 4 o'clock that's available, or you can go without date, and that's available on both of these versions. Additionally, you might think with the rehaut, in the pictures, a lot of times it looks like this is a white painted. It is actually a machined rehaut, and I think it really features nicely, and it looks a lot more attractive in person than it does in pics. Additionally, we have it covered up at the moment, so I'll go ahead and switch over to the side. You can see their logo. Personally, I think it's a very attractive logo. Really like what they're doing. It does just have the simple logo there under the 12 o'clock position, and then just basic dial text telling you it's an automatic and giving you the depth. Now switching over to the handset and the markers. So as you can see here, if you go with the date, you do have a framed date window. If not, you have just a traditional marker to match the rest of them. I do like the uniformity. While I enjoy having a date, I'm not hugely fond of the 4 o'clock position, and I do like the symmetry of having the no date version as well. In terms of the features of the handset, I would call these a cathedral style. These are, of course, fully lumed for all of the markers, as well as the bezel on this one. And this does use a superluminova. To my eye, it looks like it's a BGW9 throughout. I already mentioned with the full Lume version, the configuration there. And we'll, of course, look at the Lume shots as well, so you can get an idea of what that looks like. The finish on the handset as well as the hardware is, I would call it a satin gray. It has a little bit of sheen to it, but certainly is not a polish. So it gives you good contrast and legibility, but it definitely is not a huge pop, which I think is fitting for a dive watch. Switching over now to the case, I'm going to go ahead and set the smaller one down because the finish is going to be the same on both of these models. So these, for overall finish, is going to be a brush finish throughout, so all surfaces here are going to be brushed. You can see on the case, this has nice vertical brushing. Additionally, while we're on the side here, this does have drilled lugs, so that will make it very strap change friendly, easy to swap these out. If you're not familiar with drilled lugs, all you do is push in there to release the spring bars, push in on each side, pops right out. So that's a very welcome addition there, and I think they integrated it nicely. Turning it around to the crown side, we already looked at the crown to see that this is a sign crown, but additionally this is actually fully lumed as well. And we'll take a look at that when we look at the Lume shot. This is of course, with being a dive watch, a screw down crown. One thing that I will note, please do pay attention to the fact that this does have significant lug guard or crown guards here, so you can see that that's very well protected, and we'll talk about that more as we go on with the video. All right, so now opening this guy up, let's go ahead and take a look at the case back. You can see here it does have a Cuda on the back here, as is the namesake for this one. And we have simple dial text throughout. I think it's very cleanly finished. It has a bead blast contrasted with the brush. Really like the overall aesthetic of the case back. It is, of course, a screw down case back, so as you would expect for a dive watch. Additionally, it does not have any sharp edges, so running your finger across, putting this on wrist, there's nothing that's going to scrape you up or feel in any way uncomfortable. So I think it's a very well executed case back. Now switching over to the bracelet, you can see here this does have a solid end link, and it is a male end link on this. However, with the short lug to lug, I find it is still very small wrist friendly. As we transition down the bracelet, each of these do have a 2mm taper. So in the case of the large, it goes from 22 down to 20, and in the case of the smaller, it goes from 20 down to 18. In terms of the adjustment here, you can see that it looks like it has screw-in links. However, this is just the marker to show you what direction the pins go. So these are pin options here. You can see the arrows there, if I can get that to focus in. You can see the arrows showing you here, and then of course this is the side of the non-arrow side. So do note that these are pin type adjustment there. This was a conscious choice by Kyle of Signum. The reason for that being a lot of people complain about bracelet screws coming undone, so this was going for a simplistic approach. I found overall sizing, I don't believe this had any collars for it, or at least I did not observe any when I sized. It was relatively easy. Still, personally, I do prefer to have screw-in bracelet links. However, it wasn't bad for the adjustment there either. This is, of course, a traditional 3-link style for the bracelet, and then coming down to the clasp, you can see this does have, of course, your protection there with the fold over, and then it does just have a double pusher, so a traditional design. This is nice milled, so quality overall for the clasp. And then on the side here, we do have 5 micro adjustment holes. Personally, I am a fan of the toolless micro adjustment like you'll see on a lot of the newer Zellos. However, for an initial offering and given the price point, I think that this was a good execution. I found it to be comfortable on wrist, and overall it works well. All right, so now let's go ahead and bring in some other watches and look at for size comparison, because I want to help to give you an idea as to what this looks like. So let's slide these out to the side here, and I'm going to slide right in the middle a few different options. So first, I'm sliding in a Zelos Mako, and you can see this is, if you're familiar with it, a 40mm watch. And as far as looking at the comparison here, you can see it definitely presents much larger than this one, which again is the 40 version. And then this one, though, what I would really call this kind of a 38 or 39. I'll say a 38, and then this a 42. So this does sit squarely in the middle. However, if you look at the actual dial size for this, it does present on the larger side. So it does look more, I would say, closely aligned with the 42. So both of these, in terms of dial presence, do tend to wear a little on the smaller side. Here it is next to Arisa. This is another 40mm, and again, you can see with having this fixed bezel, the dial, I think, looks a lot larger on that one. And then here it is now next to a 42mm, and this is a Zelos Swordfish. Again, you can see this, with having its large bezel like it does, this also has a pretty large bezel, though the insert isn't quite as significant, but it does have this middle area here, so total presence. But look at that dial difference. I think this, again, does present larger. Of course, this one has the re-hot, which closes that in a little more, but keep that in mind as you're going through and trying to make your determinations for size as to which you'd prefer. Because I think a lot of people who might otherwise gravitate towards smaller watches still may prefer to bump up to the larger version. But we'll, of course, talk about that more thoroughly. So now let's go ahead and take a look and see what these guys look like in outdoor lighting, because I really think to get an appreciation for these dials, this one, certainly with the Abalone, it presents a little more boldly across all lighting. However, this Heat Meteorite, I think you really need to see across light to see how it kind of color shifts and to see the real impact of that. So let's go ahead and take a look at these outside, and then after that, we'll go ahead and transition over for a Lume shot. Looking at this on wrist and outdoors, you can see that Abalone Dial on this larger version really pops. Additionally, even on my 6.5-inch wrist, I don't think this large one wears very large at all. Certainly with its short lug-to-lug and slightly smaller dial presence with that re-hot and larger bezel, I do think that this wears quite nicely. Transitioning over now to the small one, first I want to try to capture some of that meteorite dial in the light, but unfortunately winter wasn't cooperating very well with the sunlight. It is much more vibrant in person. On wrist, you can see that this wears quite a bit smaller than the large one does. However, I think it still has plenty of overall wrist presence, though it does not have a lot of dial real estate. Transitioning over now to the Lume, as you can see, this BGW9 here absolutely does not disappoint. It is very vibrant, it really pops, and I have tested this out overnight as well. There was no time that I checked this out that it was not still glowing brightly and very legible. So whether you're looking for daytime or nighttime legibility, I definitely do not think this one would disappoint. Alright, so now that we have looked at these in outdoor and Lume conditions, and we've seen some comparisons, what are my overall thoughts on these watches? So first off, I think the crazy dial options that they have available, and I'll pop some of those up on the screen. So for these these Cudas rather, we already talked about some of the dial options that are currently available. However, there is another batch that's going to be coming with Tiger's Eye, with a turquoise copper turquoise that's available. There's going to be all kinds of different options that they have coming up, sandstone, a variety of other things. Additionally, there's a new model that's in the works, and it's going to be a bronze model that's referred to as is the Cero, and that one has even crazier dial options that are coming. You have a lumed carbon fiber. You have the 2 different versions of labradorite, and a variety of other things that are coming as well. So some really crazy stuff that is in the works here. I do encourage you to check those out. As far as the overall watch itself, I would characterize these as having a very stout, robust feel. They remind me of Helms, if you're familiar with that brand. They are nicely done, traditional overall designs for the aesthetic, but they are very robust. I think the dial options are really what set these apart. That to me is where these really shine. They have a little bit of something for everybody. If you like dials, not necessarily that are all in your face, because some of them are more subtle, but definitely that go against the grain and go for more exotic materials. In terms of overall value, as far as with the dial options you get, they're tough to find anywhere else. As far as the overall solid feel, I think they have very good build quality overall, and additionally, I think they just pack a lot of punch for the money. And then in terms of options, everything from having size options, having date or no date, having the movement choice, having a variety of dials. And they actually even are going to have the option of buying other bezels. So if you want to go with a blue ceramic bezel or a black ceramic bezel on one where it didn't come in that configuration, those will be available. So really just have loads of options that are available for you in making these your own. So I'm very impressed with those. Some of the potential cons, or at least some of my criticisms. Personally, I would have liked to have seen, as far as ideal, I think both of these are good size options. However, I would have really liked one that was kind of in the middle. This one's a little bit on the heavy side for my personal taste. This one's a little bit on the small side for my personal taste. One right in the middle that kind of split the difference, put it in around 165 grams, came in around a 40 millimeter case. So really, call this one 42, call this one 38. Come right in about 40 millimeters. I think that would have been a nice compromise between having more significant for dial real estate, but at the same time wearing a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller than this one, but again, more than this one. So that is just a personal item there. As far as the overall hardware, it's not honestly my favorite hardware set. As far as the hands in particular, this stylistically, this is of course overall preference. I don't think it really detracts from the overall value proposition of the watches, but I would like to see something a little bit different here. I think they could take this up another level and add to the customization for this overall watch. And then the same thing is true with the date window, which of course is obscured while we're focusing on that. I'm not a huge fan at date windows at the 4 o'clock position. The Cero, though, I will note, is going to be coming in at the 6 o'clock position, much preferred there. So for me personally, of these two options, I would probably opt for the large. I think most people are going to be more satisfied with the large than they would be the small, unless you have a really small wrist. Or for women, I think this is a fantastic option as well, though of course it does work as a unisex option, depending on your preference. I just think most people are going to be happier based on current standards with the larger version. As far as whether to go date or no date, I'd say that's really a preference item. For me, despite the fact that I like having a date, I would probably opt for the no date version. I think it's a little bit cleaner for the aesthetic, and again, not a huge fan of the 4 o'clock for the date window. As far as the overall lineup, I'm extremely impressed with these as an initial offering, but additionally, I'm very excited to see everything that's in store. I think the owner of the company, as I've learned from Straton, as well as my early interactions with Signum, I think he is fantastic, provides excellent customer service, extremely responsive, really engaged with the community as a whole, and you can tell just truly loves what he's doing and wants to bring excellent offerings to the company. Or to the community, rather. So I'm very excited by what's happening there. Overall, I do encourage you to consider checking these ones out. At least take a look at everything they have featured on Instagram. Obviously, we popped up some different options here. But I hope this has been helpful for you in making your decision. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. And additionally, be appreciated if you hit that like button. And of course, if you're looking for another format, you can always find me on Instagram. Thank you.